a lot of what we just talked about is about prohibition. It's about black markets, and it's about the way that these things get created. And a lot of this idea of the bootlegger and Baptist thing that we discussed in the show is this idea that the people who have a moral issue, the people who are sort of on a crusade to stop something from happening, are very often people who see something wrong and then say the government must do something. The only answer is that the government must act, but they do not accept the idea that the best course of action is inaction in some cases, right? The best course of action to stop rampant drug use, for example, may in fact not be very strict enforcement of drug laws, right? Like that might not be the right answer. And it's an answer that a lot of people will not accept. So I'm interested in this. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on how you would, I think in particular, how do you respond to that? How do you respond to the idea that you got to do something?
Well, I mean, it's tricky because people don't usually put the caveat, the government needs to do something. They just say something needs to be done or we have to do something.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, you're part of the we. There is nothing stopping you, theoretically, from doing something yourself. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, you are the only person you can actually control. Everything else is force and coercion, and it's not particularly effective because when you're forcing someone to do something that they don't A, agree with, or B, don't want to do, they're going to look for every single opportunity to wiggle around your prohibitions. Black markets are an outstanding example of this.
Yeah.
So just control you, man. It's not, start with you. Get your stuff in order. And then maybe go from there.
Did you just say clean your room?
Clean your room.
Is that what I just heard?
That is what you heard.
Clean your room. Yeah. Paul, how would you react? Or how do you react when people...
Usually it depends on the person who I'm talking to and the context and all that stuff. I guess religion's on my mind because I talked about it during the main podcast, but I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this because I don't really like shoehorning my personal beliefs into stuff, and I don't maybe this isn't shoehorning. Maybe I should just stop worrying about it. But
we have just asked you for your personal beliefs right now.
That's true.
This is
we opened the store, Paul.
Yeah,
walk through it.
Yeah, you opened the forbidden door. So it really comes down to personal, like Jen said, personal responsibility and having control of your own self. And the clean your room stuff is very similar to what Christians, how I interpret Christianity is you have to be the light to the world. And I mean, like for me, that is clean your room, but a couple thousand years old at this point. If people focus more inwardly on their own personal development and realize that the only person that they could, in Christian terms, save is themselves, for sure, because it's the choice that each person has to make individually, then you quickly realize that doing something and forcing somebody to do something usually against their will, not going to work out. And I mean, there's so many times in history where doing something has resulted in just terrible results. I mean, you guys probably have way more examples than I can even think of right now, but like, it's just down the line.
We talked about a bunch, right? I mean, we talked about the taxing cigarettes because you want to stop people from smoking. Instead, you didn't stop people from smoking. You just shifted where they buy their cigarettes to a black market, right? You know, we're doing the same thing with vaping right now, right? We're like,
Yeah.
we're like, let's.
Sorry, I know this is audio only, but you really should have seen my face just then, listeners.
Well, it's even weirder with vaping to me because it's clearly better for you than smoking, which was kind of the whole draw in the first place.
By a large margin.
And
like,
then,
it's not even just a little bit less harmful. It's a lot of bit less harmful.
But we can't allow that either because, I mean,
Reasons.
because kids or something, reasons, right? Because think of the children.
Reasons.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this stuff. Well, it's always think of the children, right? We've got to do something because if you don't think of the children. And it's funny because I don't want to be dismissive of that because there are a lot of times you should be thinking of the children, but like you're not really doing a very good job. I mean, this is a very extreme case, but there's a guy I was talking to on YouTube, like pretty much right before we started recording here, right before I came on for the show. And this guy like called himself a humanist, and I've met many of these types who believes in what he called market communism, which sounded a lot to me like just straight out communism. I think what he wanted was a market for some goods, but very strict communism for other goods. He hasn't really thought this through. But in any case, like there are a lot of people that I've met over the years who believe desperately that they care about other people and that because they care, like any of their worst ideas are valid. Like I cannot say this more emphatically. You cannot simultaneously claim to care about other people and care about the well-being of the poor or, people with limited power and also be a communist. You cannot. There are a lot of people who think you can. I promise you, you cannot. These things are completely incompatible. Communism has done more damage and created more poverty than anything humans have ever devised. There is just no version of things where you could, realistically claim that you actually care about the poor if you are going to be a communist. Like, I get it. People do it all the time. They need to stop because it's insane. They shouldn't have the moral high ground at all. But I think it's like a very extreme example of people going like, well, I see this problem in the world and therefore I want to do something without thinking through even a little bit what doing something means, right? If what you think doing something, what you think we need to do, quote unquote, is to like, completely nationalize the means of production, have the state control entire industries and people's jobs and houses, and no, stop, just stop. And it's, that doesn't help like the answer of like, how do you sway people on this? Because like, I'm not being persuasive to those people at the moment. Like I'm not even accepting that they have a case. But I do think there are a lot of people that are not that extreme that are very prone to the same kind of thinking. And for me, I always try to really sit with them and go through some of these examples and say like, look, I get where you're coming from because this is a problem, or it's, I get why you think it's a problem. Right. But look what happened when we did the cigarette thing, or look at what happened to Eric Garner, right? Look what happened when we made this illegal and then people went here instead. Right. And look at these, look at the black markets that we've created and look at what happens there. And sometimes you get through, but it's been my experience that you need a lot of examples for people and you need them to like really care about them.